Hi, this is Clarence Talks, and I'm here today to talk about reparations and how I feel about it. Recently, a speaker at the Black Lives Matter rally had said that looting, or defending looting, saying this is reparations for businesses and businesses have insurance. Black Lives Matter demonstrated on Monday afternoon. More than 100 were arrested after a night of looting and unrest in Chicago, among the fake news of a deletion of police deleting a boy on Sunday. This is reparations, Arrow activist, a Black Lives Matter Chicago organizer, told NBC Chicago. Anything they wanted to take, they can take it because these businesses have insurance. They're going to get their money back. Clearly this comes from somebody who has never filed for insurance. My people aren't getting anything. People protest however they need to. People do whatever they need. These businesses have insurance. They can get it all back. We can't get our lives back once they kill us. We can't get rid of the trauma once you've been attacked by a officer, she said. I don't care if someone decides to loot a Macy's or a Gucci's or a Nike store. That makes sure a person eats. That makes sure a person has clothes. For one, I have several problems with these statements. One, this statement right here. Businesses have insurance. Yes, this is true. This is a common argument that I hear from a lot on the left, including a friend of mine, who doesn't take into consideration that, or like I stated, have never clearly filed for insurance at all during their time period of being alive. Insurance companies will try to get out of the way of not paying you for the stuff you owe. They'll try to figure out ways to do it. Or they will try, if they have to pay you the bare minimum, so you might not even get your money back. Second of all, is this. I don't care if someone decides to loot a Macy's or a Gucci store or a Nike store. That is a problem I have. Though I have less sympathy for the bigger corporations in terms of that, my main problem is this isn't happening just at these big stores. Granted, this is not in Chicago, but this isn't the only instance of business or big businesses getting destroyed. A black firefighter devastated after rioters destroyed his bar that he spent his life savings
right now just
on.
to get some reactions.
No, we're not playing that video. A Minneapolis firefighter says his dream was always to open a sports bar, and something he achieved after countless hours of working on the product. As you know, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but his bar was destroyed when it was burnt down in a riot due to the George Floyd protest. This black man, lost his dream bar because of this. And he didn't own the building, from what I understood. This building was rented. And a GoFundMe was raised for the rebuilding of his bar, and he did get more money. Luckily, the community members and online people decided to help out. But that still brings me back to the statement, Macy's or Nike store. There are ever stores inside the Chicago community that are locally owned, that have been devastated by these riots, and she doesn't care. Stores that are probably owned by her own people. Black local owners or ever minority business owners, and they get robbed, looted because of reparations, something that these people did not have any did not have any say into what happened back then, did not have any way to evolve what happened back during slavery. This whole ideal is wrong in terms of what she said. Now, reparations as itself obviously has been a thing that has been discussed throughout the years, including when slavery had ended Abraham Lincoln was talking about it, but unfortunately his assassination ended up happening. But obviously it fell through, and it hasn't fell through or hasn't gone through since. We lead to the other point of the discussion that I want to make. The questions for reparation bills from politicians like Kamala Harris, the new VP of Joe Biden, horrible choice by the way, and the person that should have been the VP but the DNC hates her, Tulsi Gabbard, both support a form of reparations for the black community. Now, several questions I have that have never been answered no matter where I looked, because they said we want to do it, but they don't have any plan to do it, or any plan on how are they going to do it. Do they plan on paying back all African American people or all blacks across this nation with like a one-time payment? Are they gonna backtrack through the family history of these people to find out if their ancestors were slaves? Because in this case, other mixed race groups or even some distant white or Caucasian groups would get reparations too, because there have been mixed race couples throughout that time period that some of these people might have family trees leading back to people who were enslaved. Should they get reparations? Blacks were the primary people that were enslaved back then, but there was also whites. Should they get reparations? Or are they automatically exempt from this since they're white? Same with the people that actually, or the white people that actually had ancestors that were black and that were enslaved. Sort of like the joke that Peter Griffin made with having one ancestor that was black way back when, and then got that. That is a legit thing, even though that was made as a joke on Family Guy. Second of all, is this tax something that's not being explained? Is it going to be a tax in general? Is it going to be forced on one particular race, particularly the white people that they claim that oppress them all the time? Are people going, or white Caucasians going to have to be forced to pay a tax for accidents that happened, or a mistake, a legitimate mistake that should have never happened back in those time periods, for something they weren't involved in, and something that if happened today, or they had the choice in that they could have went back in time and stopped it, they would stop it. I would stop it. But unfortunately, we can't do that. So should we be forced to pay? Should my ancestors that migrated here and brought me here, should I be forced to pay for something that my ancestors migrated way before slavery started? In fact, in the 1900s, when World War II started, my aunt, she was Jewish and near Europe when World War II decided to get rid of certain people. She migrated to America to avoid getting hurt. But during that time, obviously, Japan was also one of the United States' enemies with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of this. This is more recent history, which is why I'm bringing it up. Are the Japanese internment camps, which was an Executive Order 9066, that was issued shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Franklin D. Roosevelt had signed. Military zones were created in California, Washington, and Oregon states with a large population of Japanese Americans. And Roosevelt's order commanded the relocation of the Americans of Japanese ancestry. Due to obvious hatred back then and possible attempts of spying from the Japanese government, should the Japanese begin reparations, because these internment camps weren't exactly the most grateful conditions. I'm not sure if they were forced to do slave labor like in concentration camps, but knowing the fact that we have people that are thrown in jail working for slave wages and doing that stuff. It wouldn't shock me, to be honest. So my question is it just the black community that's going to get reparations, or are we going to give reparations to the Japanese? Because that argument's going to have to be discussed. Because the Japanese have experienced the same amount of trouble, though it ended a lot sooner after World War II, as far as I'm aware. Though there was discrimination that did happen throughout America during that time because of unease and tension. But then my other question is brought up to this subject. It's a currency that was used by coal mines during the 1800s, when we used to have Irish immigrants come in the 19th century, because cash was hard to come by, particularly in lumber and mining camps. Companies issued a scrap rather than government-issued currency. They would promise these people that came in, which were usually of Irish descent, to work in these coal mines and be paid with fake money, basically. Monopoly money is probably the best term to use for it. Should they get reparations? Because they were they were basically promised a life of a high-paying job, given currency, deliberately given lower pay. The currency could only be used at the stores of the employers, which was specifically designed to get them in debt, so they had to keep working at these coal mines. And a lot of people died in the coal mines because of black lungs and unsafe working conditions and whatnot. And this was basically a form of slavery / slave labor. Should these people be getting reparations? Should we trace down all the Irish ancestors and start paying them back? That's my main question with the reparations argument. But the only thing that it really seems to be focused on is the African American community, because of a sin that should have never happened in the beginning, which was slavery. And for that main reason, and those other reasons I listed, such as not knowing how it would be taxed, not knowing how it would work out, not knowing who would get the reparations, how are we going to do it? And you got to keep in mind, there's people that moved in from the African American and other communities from the other countries like Africa, or the countries in Africa and all over, that moved in that are black and then got their citizenship and became legal American citizens. Should they have to be forced with this tax that would probably have to go through everyone in order for this to be afforded? Should they be forced to pay for America's problems when they were not even born during that time too? Would they get the reparations? These are questions I have that have never really been answered. This is something that should be done if you're going to do anything, would have to be done like a whole, sort of like the stimulus package, where they sent a large amount of money to everyone, or a certain amount of money to everyone, to re-stimulate the economy. It would have to be something like that. But the way this Black Lives Matter leader has said, I can't support this. And I know there's other people in the Black Lives Matter community, including one in Georgia, that said that their movement has been co-opted by more white Americans, young white Americans, that went in and started making all these types of ridiculous demands, including from going from supposedly police reform, which the vast majority of Americans supported, and I even have proof to show here. This was a survey taken from YouGov. This is a survey taken from YouGov, though this is a while ago. A long while ago. May 29th to be precise. So I'm pretty sure if the polling happened again, this would have happened. But it says 78% of Americans say the officer involved in George Floyd's death should have been arrested, but they've also called for reform during that. The vast majority, which is 70 to 80% of these people, would support a police reform, which I do too. A reform, not a defund, because in order to help, and especially not an abolishment, because there are clear issues and problems that need to be addressed. And that is something I do have to agree with the Black Lives Matter. Though I would tend to disagree with the factor that it specifically targets black men, because over this survey, or black people, because there is a large amount of white people that have been affected too and have been hurt throughout history. I'm not saying black lives don't matter, because they do, but the accountability needs to also look at the factor that this isn't the only group that this stuff happens to. For now, this has been Clarence Talks, and I will do more of a video on the whole ratio of crime statistics and whatnot, and what my ideas on police reform. But right now, I mainly wanted to talk about this Black Lives Matter looter, or rioter / leader, that is justifying this stuff and not thinking about the fact, or not realizing they're just not harming the big businesses, they're also harming the small businesses. And also, when you loot these businesses, the insurance rates will rise for these businesses, which will have to make these businesses charge more, which will affect the community and make it less likely to get hold of food. And note, the other funny thing I must leave off on, Macy's or a Gucci, a Nike store, yeah, there's no food in half of these things. I don't know what a Gucci is because I've never been to one. I'm going to check real quick. Okay, I checked real quick. Gucci is like a fancy store. It isn't a grocery store or anything. So what does that statement apply? In my personal opinion, if you want reparations, fight for it legally, safely. Don't go around and looting and robbing stores because you think that a system that oppressed your ancestors from hundreds of years ago, and there was ever systemic problems like the civil rights movement that had to be fought for. Don't do that. Maybe call your congressman, call your local states, your federal representatives, and ask and request about reparations and get the talk going around. Don't do this stuff. This hurts your community, and it honestly disappoints me. This has been Clarence Talks, and I will have another video in about 2 days. I'm trying to work out a schedule with all this. It's the stuff that I'm just starting to get into, and hopefully the format will get better over time. But I feel my voice needs to be heard and more matters need to be spoken. Bye.